Last night, before she closed her eyes, she did something that most people would call impossible. She took an argument that had already happened, a fight that had ended with slammed doors and silence, and she changed it, not in her mind as a coping mechanism, not as a fantasy to make herself feel better, but she changed it as an actual fact in consciousness. And the next morning he called her. He apologized. He spoke to her as though the fight had never taken the turn it did, as though something entirely different had occurred between them. And in truth, something different had occurred, because she had revised it. She had dared to assume that the past itself was not fixed, and consciousness being the only reality, rearranged the outer world to reflect her assumption. This is not magic. This is not wishful thinking. This is the principle Neville Goddard taught with absolute conviction. Imagination is the only causative reality, and the past, present, and future are all plastic to your imaginal acts. You clicked on this episode because something in you knows that what I just described is possible. Maybe you had a fight recently. Maybe there's a conversation you wish you could undo, a moment that went wrong, a relationship that fractured in a way that feels irreversible. Or maybe you've heard about revision before, but you've never truly believed it could work that quickly, that completely. You're here because you want to know what she actually did in her imagination last night. And you want to know why the man in her life responded the very next day as though reality itself had shifted beneath his feet. I'm going to show you exactly what happened, and more importantly, I'm going to show you the principle at work so that you can apply it tonight in your own life to your own circumstances, because this teaching is not theory. It is a report of what happens when you take consciousness seriously, when you stop treating imagination as mere fantasy and start using it as the creative power it truly is. Welcome. If this is your first time here, this channel is dedicated entirely to the teachings of Neville Goddard, one of the most profound mystical voices of the 20th century. Everything I share comes directly from his lectures, his books, his lived understanding that consciousness is the only reality, and that the world you see is yourself pushed out. Today we are going to explore one of the most liberating and least understood aspects of Neville's teaching, the principle of revision. Not revision as a technique you try once and forget, but revision as a revelation of how reality actually works. You are going to hear a real testimony, walk through the imaginal act step by step, and understand why the outer world has no choice but to conform when you revise from the state of the wish fulfilled. This episode will take you all the way from the moment she closed her eyes to the moment he spoke words she never thought she'd hear, and by the end you will know that you can do the same. Let's begin. The story is simple, but the implications are staggering. A woman, let's call her Sarah, had been in a relationship for 2 years. The connection was deep, but like all human relationships, it carried its tensions, its unspoken resentments, its moments of collision. One evening after a long day, a small disagreement escalated. Words were said that should not have been said. He accused her of something that wasn't true. She defended herself, but her tone was sharp, sharper than she intended. The conversation spiraled. He became cold, distant. She became hurt, then angry. It ended with him walking out, closing the door a little too hard, and her standing alone in the kitchen, tears streaming, replaying every word in her mind. That night he didn't text. She didn't text. The silence was heavy, and beneath it, a question. What if this is the beginning of the end? But Sarah had been studying Neville for 6 months. She had listened to his lectures, read his books, practiced his methods. She had manifested small things, shifts in her self-concept, changes in her finances, moments of synchronicity that startled her. But this felt different. This was not about attracting something new. This was about undoing something that had already happened. She had heard Neville speak about revision many times, but she had heard Neville speak about revision many times, but she had heard Neville speak about revision many times, but she had never truly put it to the test in a situation this immediate. That night, lying in bed, she made a decision. She would not go to sleep rehearsing the argument. She would not lie there imagining worst-case scenarios or scripting apologies she hoped he would say. She would do what Neville instructed. She would revise the event. Neville teaches that the day does not end when you close your eyes. The day ends when you decide it has ended. And if something unlovely has happened, you do not have to accept it as final. You can, in imagination, rewrite the scene as it should have been, not as a denial of what happened, but as an assertion of what is true in consciousness, which is the only place truth exists. Neville said, and I quote him directly, "If you will rewrite the scene so that it conforms to your wish, and if you will fall asleep in that rewritten state, the outer world must change to reflect it. For the outer world is only a shadow, and consciousness is the substance." This is not about pretending. This is about authorship. You are the operant power. You are the one who decides what is true. So Sarah closed her eyes. She did not try to force herself to feel better. She did not repeat affirmations or try to convince herself that everything was fine. She simply went back to the moment before the fight escalated. In her imagination, she replayed the scene. But this time she saw herself responding differently. She heard his words, the same words he had actually spoken. But now she heard herself replying with calm, with warmth, with understanding. She saw his face soften. She felt his hand reach for hers. She heard him say, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean that." And she heard herself say, "I know, I love you." She constructed the scene with sensory detail. The warmth of his hand, the sound of his voice, low and sincere, the relief flooding her chest. She stayed with that scene not for hours, but for a few minutes. She looped it gently, not obsessively, until it felt natural. And then, trusting that consciousness had received her revision, she let go and fell asleep. The next morning she woke without an alarm. She did not check her phone immediately. She felt quiet, strangely peaceful, though part of her expected to see nothing, to be met again with silence. But before noon, he called. His voice was different, softer. He said he had been thinking about the night before, and he wanted to say he was sorry. He said he didn't know why he had spoken to her that way, that it wasn't fair, and that he valued her too much to let something like that sit between them. The conversation that followed felt easy, natural, as though the tension had simply evaporated. And here is the crucial point. He did not remember the fight the way it had originally happened. His memory, his emotional tone, his entire orientation toward the event had shifted. It was as though the revision she had performed in consciousness had become the actual event, and the original timeline had dissolved like a dream. Now, let's be very clear about what happened here, because if you misunderstand this, you will miss the entire teaching. Sarah did not manipulate him. She did not send him psychic energy or try to control his behavior. What she did was far more fundamental. She recognized that the fight, as it had occurred, was not a fixed fact in some objective external reality. It was an event in consciousness, her consciousness, and consciousness is the only reality. The man, the words, the room, the anger, all of it existed as her perception, her assumption, her inner conversation about what had happened. And because consciousness is causative, because imagination is the true creator, she had the authority to revise the content of her consciousness, and thereby revise the so-called past. Neville tells us again and again that the world is yourself pushed out. That means there is no independent outer reality imposing itself upon you. There are no facts outside of consciousness. Everything you experience is the shadow of your inner state, your assumptions, your imaginal activity. When you revise an event in imagination, you are not changing something that is outside of you. You are changing the only thing that ever existed, your consciousness of the event. And when your consciousness changes, the reflection must change. It has no other option. This is law. This is the principle that governs all phenomena. You see, most people believe that the past is fixed because they can remember it. But memory itself is a present activity. You are not accessing some objective record stored in the universe. You are constructing the past right now, in this moment, based on your present state of consciousness. Neville said it beautifully. The past is always constructed backward from the present. Think about that. The past does not create the present. Think about that. The past does not create the present. The present creates the past. Your present assumptions, your present mood, your present inner conversations determine what you remember and how you remember it. Change your state now, and the past rearranges itself to justify that state. This is why Sarah's revision worked so quickly. She did not have to wait for weeks of repetition or for the universe to slowly rearrange circumstances. The moment she revised the scene in imagination and fell asleep in that revised state, consciousness accepted it as true, and because the man in her life is not separate from her consciousness, because he is part of the world that is herself pushed out, he reflected her revision. He called. He apologized. He remembered the event differently. Not because he was lying or confused, but because the event itself, as a fact in consciousness, had been revised. The outer conversation conformed to the inner revision. Let's go deeper into the mechanics of what she did, because this is where most people stumble. Revision is not about wishing the past away. It is not about denial or repression. It is about recognizing that the so-called past exists only in your imagination right now, and that you have the power to imagine differently. Neville often illustrated this with the story of a man who had been wronged by a business partner. The betrayal was real. The financial loss was real. The bitterness was real. But Neville instructed him to revise the event. Every night before sleep, the man was to imagine that the meeting with his partner had gone differently, that the partner had acted honorably, that the outcome had been fair and just. He was not to imagine the future being better. He was to go back and change the past. At first it felt absurd. How could imagining a different past change what had already happened? But the man persisted. Night after night he replayed the scene in imagination, altering it to conform to what he wished had occurred. And within 2 weeks something astonishing happened. The partner reached out, unprompted, with an offer to make amends. He spoke as though he had been struggling with guilt, though the original event had happened months before. The outer world rearranged itself to reflect the revised inner event. Neville concluded, and I quote, "The outer world is a delayed reflection of the inner," Neville concluded, and I quote, "Revise the inner, and the outer must follow." This is not a metaphor. This is not poetry. This is a statement of fact about how consciousness operates. The reason most people do not experience this is not that the principle is false. It is that they do not persist in the assumption. They revise once, see no immediate change, and return to rehearsing the original event in memory. They tell the story of the fight to their friends. They replay the wounding conversation in their minds. They justify their hurt. They build a case. They keep the old event alive by attending to it. And consciousness, being utterly faithful, continues to outpicture that old event because that is what they are feeding it. But if you revise and then drop it, if you refuse to return to the old memory, if you gently redirect your mind whenever it tries to replay the original scene, then consciousness has only one option: to harden the revision into fact. This is what Sarah did. After she revised the fight and fell asleep, she did not wake up obsessing over whether it would work. She did not check her phone every 5 minutes or rehearse arguments in case he didn't apologize. She moved through her morning in a quiet state of acceptance, as though the matter had already been resolved. And it was. Not because she hoped it was, but because she had assumed it was. And assumption, when persisted in, becomes fact. Now I want to address something that may be stirring in you as you hear this. You may be thinking, if I can revise the past, does that mean the past never really happened? Does it mean the other person never really did what they did? And here is where we touch the edge of something vast, something Neville spoke about with reverence and care. There is no other person, not in the way you think. The people in your world are not independent beings living separate lives and making independent choices that affect you. They are part of your consciousness. They are yourself pushed out. They are playing roles in the drama of your imagination, and they will always, without exception, reflect your assumptions about them and about yourself. This does not make them unreal. It makes them expressions of the one reality, which is consciousness, which is you. When you revise an event involving another person, you are not erasing their free will. You are recognizing that they never had free will in the sense you thought they did. They are free to express the state you assign to them. And when you change your state, when you revise your consciousness, they must change, because they exist in your consciousness. Neville said, the world is a mirror, forever reflecting what you are doing within yourself. You cannot see what is not within you. You cannot experience what you have not assumed. So when Sarah revised the fight, she was not forcing her partner to apologize. She was shifting her own consciousness to a state in which he had already apologized, in which the fight had unfolded lovingly, in which harmony was the truth. And because he is the world pushed out, because he exists in her consciousness, he conformed. He had to. There is no causative power outside of imagination. The entire structure of reality is imaginal. The past is imaginal. The present is imaginal. The future is imaginal. And you are the imagination imagining all of it. Let me take you now into the actual imaginal act step by step, so that tonight, if you choose, you can do exactly what Sarah did. You can revise something that happened today, yesterday, last week, last year. It does not matter when it happened in time, because time itself is a construct of consciousness, and you are outside of time when you enter imagination. Neville often said, "I am is the only time, the eternal now, the point of power." And in that now, you can rearrange any event, any memory, any past impression. First, you decide what you are going to revise. Do not choose something vague. Choose a specific event, a conversation, a moment, an interaction that did not go as you wished. See it clearly. Recall it, as it actually happened, but do not dwell there. You are not rehearsing the wound. You are identifying the scene that needs revision. Sarah chose the exact moment when her partner's tone turned cold. That was the pivot point. That was where the scene needed to change. Second, you construct the revised scene. You imagine the same situation, but you rewrite it. You see yourself responding differently, or you see the other person responding differently, or both. The key is that the revised scene must feel like the wish fulfilled. It must carry the tone of resolution, of love, of harmony. Sarah did not imagine herself winning the argument. She did not imagine him groveling. She imagined the conversation softening, his hand reaching for hers, the words, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean that," spoken with sincerity. She imagined the feeling of relief, of being understood, of the connection restored. Third, you make the revised scene sensory. This is absolutely critical. Do not just think about it. Enter into it. Hear the voices. Feel the touch. See the faces. Smell the air. Neville was adamant about this. He said, "You must make your imaginal act as vivid and as natural as any physical act." The more sensory detail you include, the more real it becomes to consciousness. And consciousness does not distinguish between a physical event and an imagined event. If you imagine it vividly, consciousness accepts it as real. Fourth, you loop the scene gently until it feels natural. This does not mean you repeat it mechanically 100 times. It means you move through it 2, 3, 4 times, adjusting the details until it flows easily, until it feels like a memory rather than a construction. Sarah stayed with her revised scene for perhaps 5 minutes, maybe less. She let herself feel the relief, the warmth, the love. She did not force it. She allowed it to unfold naturally in her imagination. Fifth, and this is where most people fail, you let go. You do not cling to the technique. You do not stay awake analyzing whether you did it right. You trust that consciousness has received your revision, and you release it into sleep. Neville said, "Sleep is the door through which the imaginal act passes into manifestation. When you fall asleep in the state of the wish fulfilled, you impress it upon the subconscious, and the subconscious, being the builder of your world, goes to work." Sarah fell asleep peacefully. Her last conscious thought not of the fight, but of the revised scene, of his hand in hers, of his apology. And the subconscious did the rest. The next morning the call came. He apologized. The shift had occurred, not because she had done something complicated, but because she had done something simple and profound. She had changed her consciousness, and the world, being nothing but consciousness externalized, changed with it. Now you might ask, how quickly does this work? Sarah saw results the very next day. But I must tell you, there is no fixed timeline. Neville always said the manifestation appears in a way you do not expect, at a time you do not expect, but it always appears. Sometimes revision manifests within hours. Sometimes it takes days or weeks. The delay is never because the principle has failed. The delay is because you return to the old state. You revise at night, but the next day you replay the original memory. You tell your friends what really happened. You rehearse your grievances, you keep the old event alive. And so consciousness continues to outpicture the old event because that is what you are assuming. But if you persist in the revision, if you refuse to give life to the old memory, if you gently but firmly redirect your thoughts whenever the past tries to assert itself, then the revision must harden into fact. It must, because consciousness is the only reality, and whatever you persist in assuming becomes your experience. This is the law. This is what Neville meant when he said, "Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and continue in that assumption, and that assumption, though denied by the senses, if persisted in, will harden into fact. Let's explore now the deeper principle at work here, the one Neville built his entire teaching upon. Imagination is the only causative reality, not some causative reality, not one of many causative realities, the only one. There is no power outside of imagination. There is no force in the outer world that can prevent your imaginal acts from becoming facts. Everything you see, hear, touch, taste, smell, every person, every event, every condition is the result of imaginal activity. Your imaginal activity, or the imaginal activity of the state you are occupying. Most people live their entire lives believing the opposite. They believe that the outer world is causative, that circumstances create their inner state, that people and events happen to them and they must react. This is the great illusion. This is what Neville called the sleep of Adam, the dream from which humanity must awaken. The outer world has no power. It is a shadow. Shadows do not create light. Light creates shadows. Consciousness is the light. Imagination is the light. The world is the shadow. Shadows do not create light. Light creates shadows. When Sarah revised the fight, she was not trying to change a reality that was separate from her. She was recognizing that the fight, as it existed, was already an imaginal construct. It existed in her consciousness, and therefore she had the power to reconstruct it. She did not need his permission. She did not need to convince him to see things differently. She needed only to change her own imaginal activity, and the outer world, having no independent existence, had to reflect that change. Neville put it this way, and these are his exact words. The world is yourself pushed out. Ask yourself what you want, and then give it to yourself. Do not question how it will come about. Just go your way knowing that the evidence of what you have done must appear, and it will. This is not belief in imagination. This is knowledge of imagination. This is knowledge of imagination. This is the lived understanding that there is nothing else. No backup plan, no alternative power, no outside force to which you must appeal. You are the power. You are the operant force. You are the one imagining it all. And here is the part that will either liberate you completely or disturb you deeply. If imagination is the only causative reality, then everything that has ever happened to you, every wound, every betrayal, every loss, was the result of your own imaginal activity. Not consciously, perhaps, not intentionally, but it was still yours. You imagined it, in the sense that you assumed it, you feared it, you rehearsed it in inner conversation. You accepted it as inevitable. And consciousness, being utterly impersonal and utterly faithful, gave you exactly what you imagined. This is not about guilt. Do not make it about guilt. Neville never taught guilt. He taught responsibility, which means responsibility. The ability to respond. The ability to respond. The ability to respond. The power to choose a new imaginal act. The moment you recognize that you have been the author all along, you also recognize that you can write a new story. You are not a victim of the past. You are the creator of the past, the present, and the future. And you can, right now, revise anything that has ever happened. Neville told the story of a woman who had been estranged from her daughter for years. The relationship had fractured after a terrible argument, and neither of them had spoken since. The woman came to Neville in despair, believing the relationship was beyond repair. Neville told her to revise the argument. She was to go back to the moment when the words were spoken, and she was to imagine the conversation going differently. She was to hear herself speaking with love, and her daughter responding with love. She was to imagine the two of them embracing, the wound healed. The woman did as Neville instructed. Every night she revised the argument. She did not contact her daughter. She did not try to force a reconciliation in the outer world. She simply revised in imagination, persistently, faithfully, and within a month the daughter called. She spoke as though the years of silence had not been quite as heavy as they were. She suggested they meet for coffee. When they met, the conversation was easy, warm, as though the old bitterness had simply evaporated. The revision had worked. Neville concluded, "You are not bound by the past. The past is not behind you. The past is now, in your imagination, and you can change it. This is the great secret. The past does not exist in some fixed archive. It exists in your present consciousness, and your present consciousness is always free to imagine differently. So tonight, when you lie down to sleep, if there is anything in your past that you wish had gone differently, so tonight, when you lie down to sleep, if there is anything in your past that you wish had gone differently, revise it. Do not tell yourself, it is pet, it is imaginal, and you are the one imagining it. Go back to the scene, rewrite it, make it conform to your wish, feel the relief, the joy, the resolution, and then fall asleep in that revised state, trusting that consciousness, being the only reality, will reshape the outer world to reflect your revision. But let us not stop with the technique. Let us go deeper into why this works, into the nature of consciousness itself. Neville taught that consciousness is the only reality, and everything else is a manifestation of consciousness. This is not philosophy. This is the most practical truth you will ever encounter. When you understand that consciousness is the substance, that the world is the shadow, you stop trying to change the world. You stop trying to fix people or manipulate circumstances. You go straight to the source. You change your consciousness, and the world changes automatically. This is what Sarah did. She did not call her partner and try to convince him to apologize. She did not send him long text messages explaining her feelings. She did not vent to her friends and build a case for why she was right. She went within. She changed her consciousness. She revised the scene in imagination. And the outer world, being nothing but consciousness, externalized, conformed. The reason most people never experience this power is that they give their attention to the outer world. They believe the evidence of their senses. They believe what they see and hear and touch. And so they remain locked in the cycle of reacting to circumstances, trying to change effects while ignoring the cause. But you cannot change the shadow by wrestling with the shadow. You must turn to the light. You must recognize that the cause is always within, always imaginal, always yours to change. Neville said, and I want you to hear this carefully. Do not waste one moment in regret, for to think feelingly of the mistakes of the past is to reinfect yourself with the failures of the past. The past only has power over you because you keep giving it life in imagination. Every time you replay the wounding memory, every time you rehearse the argument, every time you recurse the argument, every time you rest by your hurt, you are creating the past again, right now. You are making it present. You are making it causal. And so it continues to shape your experience. But if you revise, if you gently but firmly refuse to give life to the old memory, if you replace it with the revised scene, then the past loses its power. It becomes what it always was, a dream, a shadow, a construct of consciousness that can be dissolved and replaced with a new construct. Let me give you another example. A man wrote to Neville about a job interview that had gone badly. He had stumbled over his words, failed to convey his qualifications, and left the room knowing he had not made a good impression. The rejection letter came a few days later, but the man had been studying Neville's work, and he decided to revise the interview. Every night he went back to that room in his imagination. He saw himself speaking clearly, confidently. He felt the interviewer's approval. He imagined shaking hands at the end, feeling the certainty that he had been hired. He revised for 2 weeks, even though he had already received the rejection. And then, out of nowhere, the company called him back. They said they had reconsidered, that they wanted to bring him in for a second interview. The second interview went exactly as he had imagined the first one going. He was calm, articulate, impressive. He was offered the job on the spot. When he asked what had changed, the interviewer said, "We reviewed your application again and realized we had made a mistake. You were the right candidate all along." Do you see what happened? The revision did not just change his future. It changed their memory of the past. It rearranged the facts. It rewrote the story. This is not magic. This is consciousness operating according to its own law. Revise within, and the without must conform. So what does this mean for you? It means that nothing is final. No relationship is beyond repair. No mistake is permanent. No wound is irreversible. You have been given the power to go back and change anything, not because the past is flexible, but because the past is imaginal. And imagination is yours to command. You are not helpless. You are not at the mercy of what has already occurred. You are the author, and you can rewrite the script at any moment. Tonight, before you sleep, I want you to do this. Choose one event from your past that still bothers you. It does not have to be a major trauma. It can be something small, a conversation that went wrong, a moment of embarrassment, a misunderstanding, something that still stings when you think about it. And tonight, you are going to revise it. Close your eyes and recall the event as it happened. Do not dwell there, but see it clearly. Identify the moment when it went wrong, and then gently rewrite it. Imagine it unfolding the way you wish it had. See the other person responding differently, or see yourself responding differently. Hear the words you wish had been spoken. Feel the resolution, the harmony, the relief. Make it sensory, make it natural, and then loop it gently 2 or 3 times until it feels like a memory. And here is the key. When you are done, do not return to the old memory. If your mind tries to bring it up tomorrow, gently redirect. Say to yourself, no, that is not what happened. This is what happened. And bring to mind the revised scene. You are not lying. You are not pretending. You are recognizing that the only version that matters is the one you hold in consciousness now. Because consciousness is the only reality. Do this and watch what happens. It may be subtle at first. You may notice that the person involved treats you differently, speaks to you differently, remembers the event differently. Or you may notice that the emotional charge is gone, that the memory no longer bothers you, that you feel free. Either way, you will have proven to yourself that the past is not fixed, that imagination is the true creator, and that you are not a victim of what has already happened. And as you do this, remember what Neville said. Man moves in a world that is nothing more or less than his consciousness objectified. The world is not happening to you. The world is happening from you. You are the center. You are the source. You are the one imagining it all. And when you change your imaginal activity, the world must change. Because the world is only ever a reflection of your imaginal activity. Now let us step back and see the bigger picture, the spiritual depth beneath this teaching. Why does revision work? Because you are not a human being trying to use imagination. You are imagination. You are consciousness itself, playing the part of a human being. Neville taught that the true identity of every person is I am, which is the name of God revealed to Moses in the burning bush. I am is consciousness. I am is the presence of God in you as you. And consciousness is the only reality, which means you are the only reality. The world is your dream, and you are the dreamer. When you revise the past, you are not manipulating a reality outside of you. You are rearranging the contents of your own consciousness, which is the only place reality exists. And because you are the dreamer, you have absolute authority over the dream. No one else has power in your world except the power you give them through your assumptions about them. No event has finality except the finality you grant it by continuing to imagine it as fixed. This is what Neville meant when he said you are God. Not God in the sense of a distant deity in the sky, but God as the creative power, the I am, the consciousness that is the substance of all things. You are not seeking God. You are God dreaming the dream of being you, and you can awaken at any moment and take control of the dream. Revision is one of the clearest expressions of this truth, because it demonstrates that the past, present, and future are all within you, all subject to your imaginal acts. Think of how radical this is. The entire structure of consensus reality, the belief that time is linear, that the past is behind you, that you must accept what has happened and move on. All of it is an illusion. The truth is that you are outside of time. You are the eternal I am. And from that timeless point, you can reach into any moment and revise it. You are not bound by sequence. You are not limited by history. You are the one creating history. And you can create it differently right now. Neville often spoke of the promise, the great awakening that comes when you realize who you truly are. He said that every person is destined to awaken as God, to know themselves as the one consciousness animating all things. Revision is a foretaste of that awakening. It is a demonstration of your true power, your true identity. When you revise the past and watch the outer world conform, you are glimpsing the truth that you are not in the world. The world is in you. You are not subject to reality. You are the creator of reality. So do not think of revision as a technique to fix problems. Think of it as a spiritual practice, a way of remembering who you are. Every time you revise, you are asserting your authority as consciousness, as the I am, as God in human form. You are stepping into the awareness that there is no power outside of you, that everything is plastic to your imagination, that you are the beginning and the Alpha and the Omagony, the Alpha and the Omagony, the one imagining it all. And as you practice this, as you revise small things and watch them change, as you revise relationships and see them heal, as you revise your own past and feel the freedom that comes from knowing nothing is fixed, you will begin to live differently. You will stop reacting to the world. You will stop reacting to the world. You will stop feeling victimized by circumstances. You will move through life with a quiet certainty, knowing that whatever happens, you can always go within and change it in consciousness, and the outer must follow. This is the freedom Neville promised. This is the power he demonstrated again and again, and it is yours right now, not because you have to earn it, but because you are it. You are consciousness. You are the I am. You are the creator of your world, and tonight when you close your eyes, you have the power to revise anything that needs revising, to heal anything that needs healing, to rewrite any story that needs rewriting. Let me leave you with this. The woman who revised the fight, Sarah, did not just change a conversation. She changed her understanding of reality itself. She learned that she is not at the mercy of what has happened. She learned that she is not at the mercy of what has happened. She learned that imagination is not escape, it is power. She learned that she is the author of her experience, and that no matter what occurs, she can always go within and write it differently. And having learned that, she will never be helpless again. She will carry that knowledge into every situation, every relationship, every challenge. And so can you. You came to this episode because something in you knew that the past could be changed, that the fight you had, the mistake you made, the wound you carry, is not the final word. And now you know it is not the final word. You are the final word. You are the one who decides what is true. You are the one who holds the pen. And tonight, you can rewrite anything. So as you move into the rest of your day, and as you prepare for sleep tonight, carry this truth with you. The past is not behind you. The past is in your imagination, right now. And what you imagine now becomes the past, the present, and the future. You are not bound by time. You are the creator of time. You are consciousness, and consciousness is the only reality. Revise freely, imagine boldly, and trust that the world, being nothing but your consciousness pushed out, will always, without fail, conform to what you assume within. Go now, and dare to assume that the past can be changed, because it can. Try it. Do it tonight, and tomorrow. Watch as the evidence appears. Watch as the person calls, as the apology comes, as the memory shifts, as the world rearranges itself to match your revision. And in that moment, you will know beyond doubt that imagination is the only causative reality, and that you are the imagination imagining all things. You are not powerless. You never were. You are God, dreaming the dream of being you. And tonight, you will dream a dream of being you. And tonight, you will dream a different past. And tomorrow, you will wake to a different world.